Anyway, we'll kick it off. Avi Yemini, Rebel News. You are based. We only have people who are based on, and you've proven that. I mean, if anyone's more based, I say this to everyone now, though. It's like the Olympics, the greatest Olympics of all time. I just do it to everyone, so don't feel too credentialed as a result of being.
I'm starting to question what took you so long to figure out I was based.
No, I don't know. I read about it. I never could have told from your feed or from the Rebel News feed as well. I want to talk about Rebel News in particular because it's incredible stuff from a media perspective. But for those that aren't following it, what is it? What is Rebel News?
Rebel News, well, our tagline is telling the other side of the story. And the other side of the story is often uncomfortable. It's not what the establishment wants to hear. It's certainly not what the establishment wants to see other people telling. And I think, for most people in Australia, the perfect example was through COVID. We were the dissenting voice during COVID that the entire establishment, whether it was the media establishment, but also the political establishment or the vast majority, looked at us and pointed at us like we were the problem, whilst the public, especially here in Victoria, were looking at us to see what was really going on and trying to hear another perspective outside of the fear-mongering.
Yeah, and that room for me, really, it was almost like the apex of the problem being highlighted for a lot of people, because I was the same. I mean, I would follow you and Rukshan more than I would follow the nightly news, which is probably, I think I knew where the mainstream media was heading, but it was probably the rubber stamp moment where I thought, right, well, this model's broken. Do you think it is? Do you think the mainstream news, we're talking TV news, print news, do you think they're dead? Are they dead in the water?
I think they know they're dead, and that's not just because of alt media or whatever you want to call it. I think it's the fact that we're in a time of social media. Like, everybody can in real time share what's happening, and they hate that because they used to have control over the story. They used, now everyone has a social media account, has a camera on their phone. I think alternative media like Rebel News and others is just an opportunity as to take all that and take that ability and then to create kind of a system that really makes it hard for the mainstream media to control the narrative on a large scale. So, again, I'd go back to, I find that COVID is the best example for all these issues when it comes to media, because people got to see them lie. People got to see how they manipulated the story and the reality to suit the agenda. And then people got to see what alternative media can do and what what Rukshan did during COVID was very different to what I did. I packaged stories just like the media does, except we were telling the other side of the story. Whereas you had Rukshan there, literally with a live feed.
Yeah, he's walking the streets, wasn't he?
And just really calmly giving his, he was kind of commentating in this Rukshan way. Oh, there's a man on a car.
Yeah.
He's,
and it was particularly noticeable at that point because they were telling us, it happened here in SA as well, that the protests were the biggest I've ever seen, both here and probably interstate where they were. I didn't see those, but in Canberra, and yet you just didn't read about it. And when you did, it was rather than 20,000, mums and teachers and police and whoever, it was 1,000 far-right conspiracy theorists is the way they would report it. So
what they called them, they called them baby Nazis at one point.
Did they? Yeah.
Repeated and blasted by everyone because it was a perfectly coined term. They loved it.
Yeah.
Baby Nazis, that's a way to demonize these people. And then I just walked around going, hey, where are you from? What's your background? Now you're a baby. And everyone, it was mainly ethnics. That's the thing of these protests in Melbourne. It was mainly ethnics, and they were called Nazis just because they had a different political opinion. In fact, most of them were Labour-leaning people originally.
Yeah, it was. And I noticed the same thing here. I mean, all the people that I would talk to that come up to me and say, we're really worried, were, people from Hungary, people from, the Eastern Bloc.
Anyone that's lived through any of these, communism or whatever authoritarian state, they were the first to come out on the street because they realized what we were facing.
Yeah, they said we'd seen it before and we're worried. And it was just like that. And actually, quite ironically, it was these people were portrayed as being, sort of not doing the right thing for their community. And I used to say, these rallies show the actual cross section of Australia. You know, it was mums and dads, people from all different communities, and it was actually a very good snapshot of the country, I thought. So it was really stark. But that story, yeah.
It was the most diverse. Like the left should have embraced it because it was literally where multiculturalism worked. It was the best example of multiculturalism. It was the most diverse crowds, and you're talking about politically, you had whether it was political, gender, sexual orientation. You had everything at those rallies. It did not matter who or where you were from, and they were. You know, I had people walking up to me going, "Avi," like full like religious Muslims going, "Avi, I hate your Israel stuff, but you're based on this. Like, I'm with you on this." And I would turn to him. I go, "Listen, I'm happy I'm happy to have a conversation on or off camera about Israel if you think I'm wrong. But in what other scenario, in what other place would I have had that opportunity? Like literally nowhere."
Yeah, it's actually really true. It was a great unifier. It should have been celebrated from that point of view, but it feels to me like it made a real dent on the Australian psyche. COVID continues to do that. We hear a lot of people saying, "Can't you just get over it?" I mean, do you think there's a lasting impact on the Australian psyche, and what did it do you reckon?
I reckon globally there's a lasting impact. In fact, I think some of the problems that we're seeing now is actually it stems from people's distrust in government and media through COVID. So like even the disharmony we're seeing across the country now, I feel is people have found it so much easier now to kind of go down some sort of rabbit hole that as long as it goes against the what they perceive to be the narrative, then they'll jump on it, and it's skewed people. Like I saw people even during COVID, you know, those protests were, it was diverse, and you're talking about there were people that were just there to rally because they thought this is unfair. Like this makes no sense. I can't see the science behind it. And then you had people like all the way at the extreme that were like, they're trying, you know, the 5G is coming to get us, and they want to implant us, and the lizards are ruling the world, and like that. And then I saw some people start normal and kind of
drift,
move down the rabbit hole. So I think in that way, for sure, there is a lingering effect that's going to last a very long time, because I think it is important for people to have, you know, to critically think and question everything. That's fine. But I also think that some people have, they're so far into questioning everything that they don't end up questioning their own conclusions, that sometimes make less sense than the original conspiracy.
And don't you think as well, like, I mean, if you go around lying to people, you know, whoever it was that was lying to Australians, and, you know, from whatever sector, then you can't blame people for chasing rabbits down rabbit holes. I mean, you know, like, if you're going to get gaslit, people are going to go off the rails, and I just think it's a natural.
100%.
Yeah.
I blame the government. I blame the government 100%. Anyone in control at the time, whether it was state and federal, it is 100% their fault today that people have gone down that rabbit hole, and it's sad because, you know, I think a healthy dose of critical thinking is good, but when you walk around lying so much, then people are naturally going to disbelieve anything you say and disregard. In fact, I think people's natural tendency at the moment is to just push back no matter what. No matter how insane what you're saying is now, as long as it's pushing back against whatever you perceive to be the narrative. And that's the scary part of it. And I'm like you, I don't blame the people. I do not blame people for going down rabbit holes. In fact, I think at points I've gone down rabbit holes because even it made me question like things that I just accepted.
Yeah, and I think that was the wake up call for many Aussies. Was we're not used to that ethos. You know, Australia was particularly South Australia, settled free. You know, in many places, or, you know, free of war, I should say, and with almost this trusting nature of our government. And then, you know, you look at sort of other parts of the world where they've been through this sort of almost accepted model of the government tells us lies. Or, you know, the media tells us lies because it's in cahoots with the government, whatever the issue is. And it was a real wake-up call, I think, for people. So, I mean, I think that damage is real and it's going to last. But what do you call yourself now? Do you call yourself a journalist or a commentator or an influencer? Like what, or do you just not bother?
It really depends who I'm talking to. Like, if it's somebody that's going to be super triggered about me being a journalist, I go by Dr. Journalist. If I don't care. What I tell people is, I don't care what you call me as long as you're calling me.
Yeah, fair enough too.
As long as you're talking about me.
But you've done. I mean, like I think about this from a perspective of the whole media narrative. You must be a triggering force for mainstream journalists. Many of them have gone off and studied for years on end, and there's just a way of doing it. You turn up to a press conference, you take the media release, you go back to your desk and you tap it out. You take everything, you reprint it. Yeah, you reprint it, and you just there you go. There's the news, and I'm done. And then you might update the website every now and then. Exciting. Yeah. So you come along with your microphone and start asking people actual questions that makes them uncomfortable. Like some of your clips are really confrontational, and you got your big bloke there with you as well for good reason.
I'm very brave around him.
I know. Even with him around, I wouldn't be as brave as you are. But you really do. You really push the narrative. So do you think that's where a bit of the animosity comes from the press? I mean, you're always going to get, some.
100%. 100%. I think, and I can understand that. Like, think about it. Think about it. If you went and studied something for years, and then some schmendrick comes off the street and does the same thing, but he gets actually far, he gets much further than you, as in, like, what's important to media is eyeballs. That's what they care about. Like, most of them don't actually care about issues. So then you have somebody who comes in, and whether he cares about the issues, like, they don't care. It doesn't bother them if I care or don't care about the issue. It's about, I'm taking the eyeballs from them. So all they got to do is try discredit me. And that's what they've spent the last, 5 years doing every which way that they can, whether it's trying to tap into my personal life, or whether it's to discredit the way I go about it. Sometimes I like to, if you've been following me, there's different, I approach people in different ways. If I think it's something that can be done with a bit of banter, I prefer banter. Banter for me is the best way. Have a bit of a laugh and let people, pass them some rope with a smile on my face, and they'll usually hang themselves and crack us up. But that, whatever it is, they'll take anything, and they will try to discredit you, not because they actually think that there's anything wrong with what I'm doing, or it is 100% that they feel like I shouldn't be allowed to be more successful at their job than them.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You're like the bloke turns up to a union work site and works till 5:05, and they all get angry with him. So this bloke's doing his job. That's outrageous. It's that kind of model, isn't it? And by the way, I just totally endorse the use of the word schmendrick. I haven't heard that for years. It's outstanding. It's a very, it's sort of,
it's very Jewish.
It's very Jewish. It's great.
I'm very, I think since October 7, I'm just like, I've always called myself Australia's proudest Jew, but now, like, I've just embraced, I'm taking because it just annoys all the right people.
It does. That one would. And of course, it doesn't stop. You go at these clips and people call you a Nazi, and also, I mean, that's always the best. Like, it's sort of, and they do those unwashed clips. They do highlight the idiocy and the hypocrisy that's out there, because I mean, it's far right.
If you watch my original content from when I first started hitting the streets, I used to do it with a kipper on my head, like literally only to capture on camera how nuts they are, and how unself-aware that they are, that they could stand there chanting Nazi, Nazi, Nazi as somebody's walking around proudly with a kipper on their head. And it was, it was funny because at that time, I used to cop flack from some leftist Jews who were like, "Oh, you can't use a kipper as a what are they, like a costume or whatever." And
cosplay.
And I used to laugh at him because I grew up, cosplay. I used to laugh at him because I grew up ultra orthodox. I know the ultra orthodox community really well, and I know. And in fact, like when I go to synagogue, they love the fact that I'm wearing a kippah, even if I'm not doing it with the correct intention, because for them, it doesn't matter why you're wearing it. As long as you're wearing it, every 4 steps that you're wearing it is like a good deed. So they're just like, wear it if it makes. And then today, though, fast forward to today, since everything that's happened in the last 8 months, many of those leftist Jews that used to side with almost side with the crowd that would shout at me Nazi as I was wearing the kippah have come back to apologize to me about the way that they even, whether they publicly said anything or whether they just thought that I was all evil because the media had painted my views as some, racist, hateful, hate speech. I was original Jewish ban for hate speech on. I got banned for hate speech on Facebook before it was cool. So a lot of those guys a lot of the Jewish community. This is kind of the silver lining that I'm seeing from what's happened in the last 8 months, is that a lot of the left-wing Jewish community, who I saw as a big part of the problem, have woken up to the woke insanity and realized that everyone and everything that they built based on this false woke view of the world, has come back to eat them alive. And all the brownie points that they garnered for doing whatever virtue signaling, it didn't save them, didn't help them. And they realized that everything that those people said about me back then, about me being a Nazi, and that convinced them that I was a Nazi because I was slightly right of center. Now they're using that exact terminology about them, and they identify as left and progressive and whatever, but only because they're Jewish. So to me, look, I think it's a long-term win. In the short term, it's great. We've got company with some other people that have woken up to it. But I think when everything dies down after this conflict ends, I think we're going to have a few more open people in the center. I think both fringes, the right and the left, have grown a little bit, but they're more radical and they've become a lot more similar to each other. And I think that the center has broadened, and people are going to accept a bit more, open conversation and good faith discussion between anyone on the center left and center right that are willing to engage, and even engage with the fringes, but the fringes just make themselves look nuts anyways. You don't really need to do anything beyond that.
Right. And it's easy to push people out there. I mean, it's, you get all this far right commentary from the far left, and I always say that, it probably is far right to the far left, so it's that kind of thing. And of course, the same principle you're talking about is in politics as well. I mean, this sort of pandering from the centre right to green politics this is the same effect. These are people that are never going to support what you do, what we do, what I do. And yet we seem to continue to throw them bones every now and then. I just think it's a folly. You've got to be what you've got to be, and you've got to be true to it. So I get exactly what you're saying. And what about, I mean, in terms of that growing up, you're one of 17 kids, which is that's a huge household. What's that like? Like you're the 10th, I think.
I'm the 10th. That's right. I've always said I've got middle child syndrome times 17. It's look, there's good and there's bad, like most things in life. I think if you asked me when I was a kid, I'd probably, I know I would have opted to be an only child from a white Aussie family. And today, if you ask me, I'm pretty proud about my heritage, and I'm grateful to have so much family. So
that's a footy team,
except no one can play, but it's a bad footy team.
It's the Adelaide Crows, there you go.
There you go.
Just I'm burnt, I'm bitter. Now, but also then you go off at 19 and you join the IDF. You go up to the Golani Brigade. Tell us about that. That's for a 19-year-old.
Golani Brigade.
That's a pretty amazing sort of life experience.
Yeah, it was. Look, I'd come from a really troubled youth, so for me it was kind of this is make or break my life. People don't know, actually. I originally went in, and I was just talking about this before, but I went in originally for an information seminar with the ADF, and because I just had, I'd very troubled teenage years, probably an understatement, but and I remember they started talking about criminal history and all that, and I go, oh God, this is way too hard. And I was also thinking, I walked out of there going, it's too hard. Plus, like, when you join the ADF, I didn't really feel like what battles are you going to fight? You're going to fight somebody else's wars, compared to if you go to Israel, I felt like you're actually fighting for, my family that live there, my mum. So you believe in the protection of what you're fighting for. The combat, any combat that you get into, is actually life or death for the people that matter to you and for the values that matter to you. So yeah, the IDF was certainly an experience. I was a bit young still. I think at 19, I thought I knew everything, but you'll be shocked to hear that I was, I was a bit of a naughty soldier that got into a lot of strife, but all with a smile on my face, and we did have a lot of fun, and I'm still friends with a lot of the guys. Even my officer, I'm still fairly close to a lot of those guys.
It would be. That was operating on the border of Gaza as well.
20 years ago. Yeah. So it was the Second Lebanon War was my first short deployment towards the end of my advanced training. But then most of my deployment was Gaza. It was Kfar Aza, which is literally that army base that was decimated, like where they butchered all the soldiers. That was literally my army base, where they butchered all the soldiers on October 7. I went back to visit a couple of weeks after the October 7 in October. It feels like a lifetime ago, but I think it's one of those things. I truly believe, though, in Australia, it's what we're missing a bit. Like, one thing that compulsory service gives to a country is national pride. Like, people here are just like, the Australian flag is treated like a racist symbol here, whereas when you go to Israel, I don't know if you've ever been, but when you go to Israel, the flag, you're proud of it. Everybody's proud of it because it means so much, and everybody's in one way or another has served to protect it. Like the majority in Israel, you got, I would say 80% of the country is proud of Israel, of the country, of everything. And they've fought for it. They defend it, whereas in Australia, it's the opposite. I feel like 20% of the country feel like, maybe I'm wrong. It might be just the loud minority hates Australia. I don't know anymore. It's very hard to tell because that's the problem online.
Well, it magnifies that voice, but you're right. I mean, if you go to a lot of other countries in the world, you just see the one flag. You might see a state or a provincial flag as well. But here, you go to Parliament House, and down the main boulevard, there's three. There's the Aboriginal, the Australian, and the Torres Strait Islander flag. None of which, no issues with the flag, but there should be one flag flying over up. I mean, there is only one flag flying over a Parliament, but around the precinct
nowadays is mainly transgender flag.
Well, and that one as well. That's right. You go to some council, chambers here in South Australia, and they've got about 6. So I mean, and then there's one topical issue of the day. So I know I take your point. I think there is that need to sort of have some pride in the flag. The United States, you won't see anything but the stars and stripes, except in some places. But
mind you, I did go to the American consulate recently here in Perth, and I walked in, and it was literally the trans flag was everywhere.
That was the Californian consulate.
Yeah, it must have been. It must have been. I was like, kind of like, what is going on?
There are patches of it, but you get to some places that it's a bit better. But so I mean, I always think that wokeism, is, and I hope, but I think it's kind of on its apex, if not sliding down the other side. Do you get that feeling?
I think so. I'd agree with you. 100%. I think that even now, and it's part of what I was just saying to you is, I think, and not just Jews, I think the rational part of the left that may have even lost a bit of rationality over the last few years, where they kind of went into the wokeness, fell for it a bit. I think that group have woken up to realize that their allies are nuts. They're bonkers. They're fighting for things that are going to end up killing them. Like the example is now you see like the far left and these jihadis marching together. Just complete useful idiots that at some point are going to get eaten by those that they empowered, by those that they rallied, and they're going to be shocked. They're going to be shocked like nobody told them that one day these guys who every other day call for your beheading, they're going to be shocked that when you help them gain local power, and it's happening already in the West. If you look at the UK, there are areas which have completely been taken over, and I wouldn't want to be a gay man in some of those areas walking around, because even within the government, you just got zero protections.
Do you think, because I mean, post October 7, it appears that, and I know, you know, the term anti-Semitism we've talked about before, because it's probably not, it's not an ideal term, but let's just use it for the moment. Do you feel like, I mean, obviously it's more clear and front-facing and obvious now around the traps. We've seen the protests that have been so appalling, but do you think the rise of the far left and the rise of the influence of the far left has just allowed that sentiment to show itself where it was always there? Do you think it was always bubbling around, or has it just risen as a concept over the last? Because you've been talking about the rise of anti-Semitism for years, but it feels like since October 7, it's really shown its ugly head.
Well, I've been pointing out the rise of the anti-Semitism on the left for many years, and I've been trying to warn, especially my own community, guys, who are you cuddling up to? Whether it's a far left, or also when there was a lot of the interfaith stuff where I saw them, you know, happily standing together with people that, you know, if you go and watch their sermons, don't like you very much. Yeah. And it's, you know, has it been bubbling? It has been bubbling. I'll tell you the truth. Even I got a shock after October 7th, because think about it, like the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And if you put it in terms of Australia, you're talking about, what are we in Australia? It would be, it would be about 10,000. Imagine 10,000 Aussies were murdered in some of the most heinous ways, in one day, in one attack. How would Australians react? Then think that every other, you know, all these groups around the world were rallying against Australia for the way that they were ensuring it doesn't happen again, or even just trying to bring the hostages, which would be here again. It would be 1,000 hostages, be something like that if you compare the numbers. So it was kind of shocking to me, even though I've been following it for years and I've been warning about it for years. It was shocking for me to see how intense it was. And there's a mix. Look, the far left have normalized Jew hatred and anti-Semitism. They are complete racists, and they've shown their cards. You know, they've got this idea that there's an oppressed and oppressor. You know, Israel is part of the West. They have to be the oppressor, and the poor Palestinians, they're the oppressed. Doesn't matter. No matter what acts of resistance they committed, it's all legitimate. And what I would tell people is, you know, just when you look at that conflict, for example, forget about, because you can't help it. You've been fed so much stuff about Israel for so many years. You may not like Israel. You don't have to like Israel. What I would say to you is just listen to what the left is saying, their terminology, everything they're saying, and now apply it to them saying it to Australia, because they say the same thing about Australia. So unless you're willing to let them apply that to you in Australia, you can do it, and you shouldn't join them now when they're doing it to Israel. And it's scary to think how many people have fallen for it, whether it's from the broader community or the right. There's this fringe right that have also grown in this period. What do they call it? The what is it? The horseshoe theory, is it?
Yeah,
where the two sides meet at the end, and you're really seeing that now, where they're literally making the same arguments. And it was before October 7 where I tried to show people that. I went to a rally, a protest. It was the neo-Nazis. I'm not just calling them Nazis. They call themselves neo-Nazis, whatever, the white supremacist group. And then it was the anti-fascists that were rallying against each other. And I went to both sides. And the funny thing is, this is before October 7. Both sides were telling me free Palestine, like it was like a dig at me, like Israel is the enemy. And it's like, don't you see? You guys dress the same. The Antifa and the Nazis in their black. They are actually the same thing. Yeah. And it doesn't worry me much when the extreme does it. What's scary in the last few months is watching how many how many normal people are falling for parts of that without thinking about the ramifications of what you're siding with. And I always, that is my message to people, is just apply it to Australia, because everything they're saying about Israel, the Western colonized country, and I'm happy to have that conversation and argue it till the cows come home. But the point is, pretend like it's the same scenario as Australia. In fact, I think the Jews to Israel have a lot more of an argument, of a claim, than white Australia has to Australia. And I fully support white Australia to Australia. I think Australia today is the best country in the world. And I think everyone is equal here. We all have, and I think that what we've created, what the English colonization ended up causing here, is a beautiful thing. There may have been some horrific things along the way that happened, but where we are today is a great thing, and it is not worth tearing that down. What those people are calling for is tearing that down, first in Israel and then here. And same as the extreme Muslims that are going to the Islamists that are going there in large numbers. They're doing the same thing. They want to take down Israel, but for a different reason. For them, it's a different ideology. It's an ideology that'll eat the left at the end. But for now, they both want to tear down Israel, and then they both want to tear down Australia. Now, where do you want to be at the end of that?
Well, this is interesting, because when you talk about kind of anti-Semitism, what we seem to hear about is the far right. They always talk about that.
Yeah.
And we went through this during Senate estimates not that long ago, that the annual report is just replete with references to far right extremism and white Christian nationalists and all this sort of thing. Yet when you actually go back and look at the last 10 years of terror attacks, they're all radical Islam.
Yeah.
So, like, what's causing that? I mean, is it just that that's an easy standard bearer for hate, that symbol, which obviously it is and it should be, that far right messaging. But the truth actually is that the far left, are much more accomplished at that sort of stuff, I think, than anyone.
Well, you got to look at who often are pushing these inquiries or whatever everywhere around the world. It's generally the left that are screaming loud about Islamophobia. In fact, now they can't. When we see the numbers, there was a report just a couple of days ago where anti-Semitism reports, like serious anti-Semitism, Victoria Police reports 5 times any Islamophobic reports. And you got to and just keep in mind how small the Jewish community is compared to the Islamic community. So the numbers are staggering; they're huge. But that doesn't stop, any Labor politician, definitely the Greens, but it doesn't stop them whenever they want to, whenever they feel like they have to say something about a pretty horrific anti-Semitic attack. They have to go, we've got to put an end to these anti-Semitic attacks and Islamophobia. It's like, why do you have to inject Islamophobia here when since October 7, it's either been the left or that same community that you're also making somehow into the victim of this? It's like, and so in the past, I feel like the left can't see they can't call out the anti-Semitism from the Islamic community. They just can't do it because it goes against, because the poor Islamists are the oppressed in their worldview, so they can never be at fault. So they'll never call them out. So whenever you've had these inquiries, and I've seen them, but even here in Victoria, there was the Senate inquiry where it was led by the Greens, who were calling out, the far right and the exactly what you described, but there was no mention of the left or the Islamists. Now, if you go to any Jewish community anywhere, go here, Melbourne, South Australia, the same, go ask them who are they most scared of as Jews? Like, which anti-Semitism scares them the most today? The order will be 99% of Jews, except for those in the far left, will be the jihadis, the Islamists, the far left, and the neo-Nazis in the right are at the bottom. Why? Because the thing about the far right is that at least they're honest about their hate. Like, they'll just say they hate Jews. They literally say that there's too many Jews, Hitler, all that horrible stuff. But they're just blatant about it. The far left, they paint it as, we're anti-Zionism, we're anti-colonization, we're anti all this other nonsense. They just won't say Jew, but they mean Jew, because when when you connect everything they're saying, really the only people they could be talking about are Jews. And then the Islamists, they get a free pass because, it's cultural differences. It's in their culture. It's not liking Jews too much is kind of embedded in it. And so they get this kind of free pass from the left. Interestingly enough, lately, the right, the Nazi right, has kind of also cozied up to the jihadi Islamist, where a few years ago they were anti-Islamic, but I think they just see them as an ally to not hating, to hating the Jews. And then also on top of that, a lot of their other views they share, because at the end of the day, the Islamic community is quite conservative, like on a lot of issues. They're conservative. So that right wing, the far right neo-Nazi group kind of, they go, all right, we'll accept their crazy jihadi stuff because most of it's targeted at the Jews anyways, because we like all the other stuff they say. Even, I'm anti-woke, but I certainly don't subscribe to any kind of radical hatred of any group, like even the gay community. I have no problem with people being gay. I'm actually probably a bit more libertarian in that way. I think let every adult do what he wants, as long as you're not hurting somebody else. And that should apply to everything. So whether it's your sexual preference or it's, pushing your religion, like I'm happy for everyone to practice whatever religion, as long as you're not sitting there preaching about, Judgment Day, where the Jew's going to be behind the rock and maybe come and kill him, because that's, you're hurting me when you say that, because people take that literally and I might get hurt.
Yeah, it's actually, it's quite an interesting sort of dynamic. You say the horseshoe effect, and it strikes me. I often ask people what they think the greatest threat to Australia is in 2024. What's your take on that?
It's crazy because I wonder. I haven't thought. There's so many threats at the moment.
Yeah.
What is the greatest threat at the moment? Probably complacency. I think, or apathy. Like people not standing up for what's, like people watching on and thinking they're not comfortable with what they're seeing around them, but too scared to speak up because they don't want to get cancelled or they don't want to be the target of some of this horrific abuse. Because I truly don't know which group of those. I think the far right is the least of my concerns for all the reasons I gave you before. I think that they're just so honest about it. Like, whatever. I don't even care. They can go on Twitter and they can say this. Like, it doesn't bother me because at least, like, we know, and I think anyone with half a brain looks at what they're saying and go, you idiot. Whereas I think the left is a lot more dangerous because, firstly, I think they have much greater numbers. I think that they've also been accepted in a lot more in the mainstream. So they haven't been demonized for their horrific, abhorrent views. And I think like they're so unchallenged. So I think that they're kind of the out of the three groups right now, they're probably the most dangerous, because also they're enabling the third group, the jihadis. I don't think the jihadis have much power yet, but that's yet. If the left get their way, well, we'll have open borders. We'll see ourselves like parts of Europe, and the left will again be shocked at the end of it. But it'll be too late. There's nothing you can do at that point. So I'd say, thinking out loud, I'd say the far left is certainly the biggest threat out of those three groups. But I think people's unwillingness to stand up for what's right, that could be our biggest threat, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to get us.
I totally agree. I mean, I say this to people all the time. We've got the vast majority of Australians who are on the same page, the quiet Australians who would think, I think, probably very much like you would or I would on most issues, but perhaps don't want to get into an argument with it at their work or their fear of cancelled or at a dinner or whatever it is, and have just assumed that the institutions will take care of them in the way they have for the last 50 years, not understanding that the Bastille is being stormed. I think it was Christopher Hitchens who said, the communists are not storming the Winter Palace with fur hats anymore. They're already, into the institutions and into the universities and into the schools. And
that is a mighty fine clip. I think I've watched.
It is a great clip, isn't it?
I've watched.
Yeah, we should put it up.
I've watched
We'll
a lot
put
of
it up
his,
because it really is.
Yeah,
It's spot on, and I think, and I agree with you. A combination of the two. You're absolutely right about the far left. I mean, in terms of the prosperity of this country, we should be absolutely humming, but we're wrapped in green tape and red tape that stops. Proposals for spurious environmental grounds, like the far left are the only ones that care about the environment. People like you and I just want to see oil going down the street all day because we're just bad people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's complete nonsense. So I totally agree with that. I think on a whole range of levels, complacency of the far left is really the topic, the number one issue. And the people have got to be involved. I mean, I think the sort of stuff that you've done in terms of showing how people can move the dial, you've shifted the dial, I think, probably in Australia more than you realise, probably across the world. You travel a lot as well. You get out to places like Davos.
Yeah.
And
my home away from home.
Some of those clips, you love it there. Do they love you there still?
Do you know what, like, you'd be surprised. That's the thing. Davos is just also a broad church. There's so many people that go there for different reasons. Like most people that go there are opportunistic, whether it's business, political, whatever. There's certainly that evil element and present, and that's from top down. But I think if we can have more, more. Even on our side, more politicians, more of those that are willing to engage and be challenged instead of, what they usually do to me, which is name call, silence. They try to defame you. Like they'll just sit there and character assassinate you. Like the first thing they'll do is just they'll go for your character. No, I'm not going to talk to you because you are this, Nazi, whatever. They have a whole list of things that they go through. And I think if we can get more back to a bit more honest politics, even with those we disagree with, and I think that's what's important, is you got to be able to, and that's to everyone, like from our side or the other side, is people need to be willing to engage. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to convince anyone of anything because no one's even listening. And that includes me.
No, that's right. No, and I mean, you see it here with press conferences where, some poor cadet journalist has turned out to a job that the 40-year veteran used to go to, and they ask questions not wanting to upset the politician, the premier, the prime minister, whoever it may be, because then they'll just get the media releases turned off, presumably. I don't know.
It's infuriating.
And then your job gets harder.
It's infuriating.
I mean, and you see it because you appear in those huddles, and you did one the other day where I think you were asking the bloke from Channel 7 where he was going to apologise about COVID, and he just kind of eventually slunk off into the distance. And this is not what I'm used to. I'm going home.
I felt kind of mean to him, but like I was wishing.
Yeah, he said I wasn't there at the time.
I was just like wishing it was really one of those that were like, I don't look, I think remaining silent through what happened and working for that organization to a degree, you need to be held accountable as well, and you should condemn them now. You've got hindsight now, like condemn them for what they did. But I was really like, I wish it was, one of the ones that were there on the front line, just republishing the press releases, condemning and demonizing all the protesters. But this poor soul, he was the only one there, and it just irked me up the wrong way. He's standing there telling the story about Nick Patterson, who was brutally bashed, arrested, jailed, and this guy has no criminal history. I've gotten to know him over the past few years through covering those protests and then through covering his trials. And, he's one of those people that I got to see actually stands for what he believes in, will not back down, but he's actually a really good guy as well. Like he's just a genuine guy, and his wife's the biggest sweetheart, and he's, they homeschool their kids. And that's the last thing in the world that I'd ever want to do is homeschool my kids. I'm glad for school, not because of the education, but because it's a break. These guys, they homeschool it, but they do it properly. They put the effort in it, and then to see that Channel 7, after the way that they defamed him, and when he was arrested, the way that they not only didn't show mercy for what we all saw with our own eyes, and even, pretend you didn't understand what was going on the day. But when the body worn camera was released and you still didn't stand up for the little guy, the Victorian that was doing nothing wrong, that was targeted by the police for daring to stand up during COVID, but again, even then was complying with them, and that you were unwilling to stand up. And the only time you're going to come and pretend like none of that ever happened is when he finally wins in court 3 years later. Where were you when he was in jail? Where were you when all these people? I know where you were. Okay, maybe not specifically him. I couldn't find a report that he fired. I didn't know when I interviewed him. I couldn't find. I went to look to see if there was something. So I really wanted to make myself feel better because he was kind of sheepish at the end of that interaction, and I kind of felt a bit mean. So I was like trying to make myself feel better to find some story that he did that was like really pro and against the COVID, against the protests or whatever. I didn't find any, but where were you in that time? Like the network you worked for were condemning, like they condemned Nick Patterson for the exact thing that they're now turning around and they're going, oh, wow, naughty police. I wonder how the police got away with that at the time. How did they get away with it? It was you guys that cheered them on and looked the other way when things made no sense. And that's, like, I think in the last few years, that's the stuff that I'm most proud of that Rebel did, was that and the actual kind of activism we ended up having to do through the Fight the Fines program that we started, because all the civil liberties organizations, they went MIA. They also didn't want to touch this stuff during COVID because even those idiots fell for it.
Yeah, everyone did. I think it showed us a lot about where the leaders are in this country, to be absolutely honest. I mean, we didn't, there weren't many safe havens for those of us that were looking to try and push a different narrative. And I mean, it was really fascinating to watch that play out, particularly in Victoria. You were sort of right there in the eye of the storm. I was going to ask you, just we'll zap it up, but in the last interview, did I sort of ask someone, what would you do if you were in Canberra? What would be the one thing you'd do to fix Australia, or some sort of policy thing? I'm always interested in hearing people's views on that, because
all I can tell you is that the system is so broken that, like, which piece do I want to pick up and work with first? I think the first, I dare say, probably because I come from a media perspective, so I'd probably approach it from that. I would cut all state funding to media. I just cannot understand why. It makes no sense to me in 2024, where firstly, mainstream media is dying, but why we're funding it when they've got a political slant. So why should I on the right have to pay for the left, for somebody to essentially advocate against me and everything I believe in? And I just don't, like, I think that we live in we're not 30 years ago where it's just the idiot box that everybody has. Now everybody has, information flows freely everywhere. Why do we need state-sponsored media? If they're doing a good job, the market will pay for them. So
subscription service for the ABC.
Subscription service for the ABC, and goodbye, good riddance.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be too much take up. I certainly wouldn't be paying that monthly rate, I can tell you. But look, it's just a fascinating time. What's finally next in terms of travel? Have you got any more plans to go overseas and badger people?
Yeah, I have the rest of the year is actually looking quite busy. So I've got New Zealand. We're doing a documentary there. Then I'm heading over to Israel quickly. And then we've got the US elections this year. So I'm thinking what is the one thing that could make the US elections more interesting? Throw in a little Aussie, a miniature Aussie to storm the streets and talk to the people. I reckon I'm thinking maybe America. I might head there before the election and do some coverage from there.
I reckon that is the absolute ticket. That would be fascinating to watch. I think it's going to be. It's a fascinating election. It's only going to get more so.
It's going to be entertaining, no matter how this plays out. It's going to be fun.
And what about in terms of following you? Pete, you've got a massive social media audience, so you don't need me, to help you there at all. But just people are very interested. I'm sure they'll be interested, the people that watch this, to sort of follow you more. Where do they get you?
If you go to followavi.com, it's got all the lists, like for whatever social media you have. Everything's there, and you can also, it has a link to my book. So for those of you who love watching my detractors talking about me, because I know everyone does. Everybody seems to be so interested in my personal life. I tell people, go read my book, and you can know more than my detractors, and that's a lot.
Called A Rebel from the Start.
A Rebel from the Start.
Is your book?
It is.
Yeah.
Have you read it yet?
Yeah, good title too. I haven't yet.
I'm glad you said yet.
No, I will. I want to write my own book so that I can have written one more than I've read.
But I might inspire your book, because if you read mine, read mine, you'll go, that is so easy. I can beat that, and then you'll be able to write a book.
I just haven't got anything to say. That's all. I'm waiting to do something. So I have years of me cowering in the corner, and that'd be all you'd get. It's not. I don't have anything to go with. So
you're being humble. We know. I think the viewers, of your show would. There's a reason why they're watching you.
Yeah,
it's like a train wreck.
Assume somebody is. There might not be anyone out there. We don't know.
Guys, put your hands up if you're watching.
Yeah, that's right. Avi, it's been a pleasure. Keep up the great work,
mate.
And we'll follow you with interest. And must get over there to Melbourne at some stage and come and see this studio for myself and see what you've been making Rukshan do. I think it's quite outrageous. But anyway, that's the way it is.
I support. It's all about equality. I let everybody work for me for free.
Good on you, mate. We'll see you soon, and keep it up, and all the best. We'll be watching with interest.
Thanks, mate.